basically what I do is like I set up shows, try to get bands back on the road, try more importantly make sure they have a good time and enjoy themselves.
Cool.
Book and promote uh, what has become the parts of being DIY shows, in that we're doing it without like going to a standard venue. A band will be like, they'll email me like, hey, we need this date like anywhere from like a month to 2 months in advance. Can you hook us up? And I'll be like, yes. And I'll be like, what do they sound like? And I listen to them and I'm like, okay, who I know that sounds kind of like this. And I'll try to think of bands, but also I'll be looking out for bands who are asking for shows, and bands also I know who have a draw. And also I try to find, occasionally what I try to do is find bands who sound different but have certain similarities, and they're a different sound, but it brings people who might not come to that show otherwise. I think there's a great place for cross drama, especially in Pittsburgh, because scenes are so diverse, but also Pittsburgh is very close, and a lot of people know a lot of other people. I don't know, I do a lot of things that are punk and what some people might describe as like indie, and some heavier bands, and I'm trying to get more into things that are experimental and some stuff that's more alternative to things. But I've like booked straight up rock and roll bands. There's certain houses that kind of specialize in things. It's definitely some houses are better to have acoustic shows at because it has more of like an intimate, homey feel, even when it's smaller. And like for a heavier show, you're gonna want like a basement or a very stark space that not a lot of things can get messed up, especially if people are gonna be more exuberant at the show. You want something more like a basement, like Bates or something. The quote-unquote company name of my quote-unquote booking agency is Fine I'll Do It Booking, because it's originally what it was like, hey man, no one else will help us and we want to play a show in Pittsburgh, and I say fine, I'll do it, and it goes on from there. I have a love of music and I want it to be able to happen, and I like helping people do things that are not on the terms of what's conventional, because there's a place for things that are like, like you're like the idea of the rock show or the rock gig at a club. That doesn't include everyone, and sometimes I'm handling things that feel like overflow from that, and sometimes it's things that would not necessarily get representation there, or it's just something that's a little weird, and I try to help the weird people or the underrepresented people when I can. I do this to help bands. I go around and I take donations at every show that I book for them. I try to get locals who will bring people to the show, because you want there to be an audience, and you want at least part of that audience to pay for the show so that the band can have gas money. At a DIY show, or whatever you want to call it, a house show, however you express that, is that you have to have someone go around and be like, hey, there's a band on tour, you should give me $5, or failing that, whatever you have, so that they can have some gas money and they can continue doing their art. The thing that made me feel passionately about it was just seeing that great bands could come through and that they're doing it for not a lot of money and just out of passion, or at least for a need for their art to be heard and understood. And I'm like, well, if I can help that, I want people to basically to go into my shows and see something that maybe they haven't seen before, or if it is bands have all seen before, to enjoy them again and to leave feeling slightly better than they did before. I think the scene definitely in the past year or two is definitely switching from survive to thrive mode, because there's a certain comeback. There's a few more house venues. We could always use more house venues or more spaces, but Pittsburgh is moving on, because Pittsburgh is a town where you feel big and you feel small at the same time, because there's an awareness of everybody, but eventually you see just how many people there are and how many people are doing different things. It doesn't have the same sort of like massiveness that Philly or New York has, or a bunch of other different cities, but it has a very strong scene, and it has a certain like tactical location, because I've seen Pittsburgh pick up and intercept shows. Like, people had last minute shows falling through in Pittsburgh, because they would have been able to step up and help with shows that have been falling through in like Ohio, like parts of the South, like all over the place, and people have been able to come here instead, and we've been able to save them. The scene is going to get smarter, the scene is going to get stronger, and we just divest ourselves of the bad elements and move toward building the best possible thing that we can, and try to have some fun while doing it, and overall not taking ourselves too seriously.